The reason I only worked 2 years as a union carpenter in Las Vegas is because I learned that if you work 50 years in the union, they give you a real nice retirement party, beautiful dinner, and a gold watch. And at the end of that ceremony, if you still have, as a carpenter, all 10 of your fingers, they cut one off for you because carpenters lose their fingers. Now that's a joke. Sorry, union guys. But it illustrates one of the realities of working in the trades, working anywhere really. Driving an automobile, anything like that, the truth is, sooner or later somebody's going to bleed, and you need to have some way to take care of it. So I have 2 stories that illustrate the importance of being able to stop the bleeding and take care of other first aid problems if you happen to be where they happen. And the first is a little bit silly. I was working in Wyoming, up the South Fork of the Shoshone River. Ed Langseth was the foreman on the job, and all of a sudden, Ed cut off the tip of his left finger on a table saw. And he let out a bellow, and I thought I would be helpful, and I'd run around and grab a first aid kit and sort of be a hero. There was no first aid kit. And while I was running around like a chicken with my head cut off, Ed finally screamed at me, "Get in the car!" And so I got in the car, and he wrapped the tail of his shirt around his finger, and we drove to the hospital, and all was well. Sort of. The second story is much more serious than that. I learned it from Chris Johnson on Shop Talk, which is we have a Zoom meeting, and we share experience and information and solve problems as part of the Essential Craftsman Academy. Well, Chris is an engineer, and he is double sharp, and he was working in his garage the week before. And he said, "I got to tell you guys about this." And he heard his neighbor in their garage doing woodwork. You can tell woodwork by the sound, right? I mean, it sounds like this sometimes. Well, Chris heard that sound, and then suddenly he heard screaming. Screaming. He blasted out of his garage, taking his first aid kit, threw open the door into the neighbor's garage, and there was a young man, 20-something, who had just power planed off the palm of his hand. When the shivering stops, let me give you some more of the details. He had kind of an L-shaped stock removal, about 3/16 of an inch off the high spots, and Chris could see the blood everywhere and the cartilage right here. The kid was hurt. So Chris grabbed a bandage, blood stop, right, a bandage, had the kid squeeze that, put a tourniquet on his arm, turned around, and the 60-year-old father who was in the shop with him was having a heart attack. Think of that. Now, fortunately, Chris has had Red Cross, first aid, CPR, AED training, and I don't know how much else, but he could deal with it. And he had the kit. And so they got Dad under control, and he was monitoring the kid. He said the family came in and did their job of flying to pieces. There was screaming, there was yelling, but one of them dialed 911. Fortunately, the fire station was just blocks away, and it took about 4 minutes. Fortunately, Dad didn't lose consciousness. His heart kept beating, but Chris said it was fitful? There's a term, but it was beating. So he monitored this, he monitored that, and he had our attention. And I hope I have your attention right now, because I am a believer now that what they say in the military applies to first aid kits in our shop. 1 is none, and 2 is 1. All right, so now that we're all thinking, gosh, maybe I do need a first aid kit where I work or in the shop or in my car, and we're realizing that having 1 might not be enough if somebody can't get their hand on it right now, here are 3 sort of different tiers of first aid kit approaches. They range from barely adequate to fully adequate to what I think is the best value and probably the most effective solution, which is a Milwaukee Packout with a first aid kit in it. First, I've had this for a long time. It rode around behind the seat of my truck. It's been on the wall of my shop. And according to the link we find online, this will cost you $30 or $40. And when you open it, it's so fussy and so small and so incomplete, it'll stop. You know, you can dig out a sliver, you can maybe put some ointment in your eye, you might be able to bandage some kind of a cut, but there's no tourniquet, there's no real bleed stop capacity, and so better than nothing? Absolutely. The solution in a shop or a job site where serious work is happening? Probably not so much. But, I mean, if that's all you can do, then do that. This, Nate got online and ordered 2 of these setups. This is about 50 bucks, I think, and it's pretty good. Let me show you the inside of this. There's a lot of stuff in here. Heck, there's a flashlight. You know, there's a tourniquet, there's safety pins, there's a lot of stuff. But when you start jerking the stuff out of here, I don't see myself ever getting it packed back up. But that sure would be a good one for in a car. I mean, it's pretty good. And then he beefed it up by an Israeli-style tourniquet. Those people know how to make gear. Bleed stop bleeding in seconds, and more of the same. This is emergency bandages. I mean, with this stuff, augmenting something like this, you got a fighting chance. Now, one of the things that came up in that conversation in Shop Talk from Chris and a paramedic, I don't remember his name, but he's part of the conversation, so he had informed opinion, was that in a wood shop, in a shop generally, your first aid kit should be down by the floor because you might not be able to stand up. You might be losing consciousness, and if it's up on a shelf, well, there you go. There you go. So put it down where you can get at it at crunch time. But here's what I like about the Packout, and here's why I think it's really not any more money at all. Number one, it fits with your other Packouts. So there's a lot of ways to make that convenient. And then number two, when you open that up, you can see what you've got, you can get it out, you can put it back, you can sort of rummage through here and not just be overwhelmed and mentally shut down because you can't tell what you're looking at when everything's in a Kleenex box. You can also take these out and put them to where you're working, or someone, I mean, that's pretty slick. And then if you take a better tourniquet, there's a tourniquet in here, and it's better than nothing, sort of, but it's only barely. It's not one of those that you can operate with one hand. And if you put some more blood stop, and you can pump this thing up, and you can take out some of the stuff that's redundant, maybe, and put something in there that's more life-saving. That's up to you. But this cost 130 bucks, I think, yesterday at Home Depot. They had it on sale. I think they're 170 generally online. But the first thing to realize is, by the time you put together this kit, you spent 90 or 95 bucks. This at 130 is exactly the same because an empty Packout costs you a $55 bill, I think. So I'm a fan of this as a solution. More importantly, I'm a fan of, like Chris said, getting the kit and getting the training. He recommends Red Cross, First Aid, CPR, AED. The AED is a defibrillating device. You're in the airport, somebody collapses, everybody screams, nobody knows anything. You've had that training, you're useful. It's like any other job skill, it can turn you into a useful human. It's like a fire extinguisher. You only need it when you need it. And once you need it, and you don't have it, you'll always wish that you did. So Milwaukee didn't give me this. I don't have that many Milwaukee tools. I like them, everybody likes them. But I'm not afraid to sort of throw down that this is a very good solution. And this is a good solution too. But this has got, they're representing it as having 193 first aid supplies. There's lots of bandages. There's lots of gauze pads. There's adhesive tape. There's antibiotic ointment and antiseptic towelettes and rubber gloves and burn cream. And there's a SAM splint to kind of support somebody's arm or leg if it gets broken. That feels really good, they tell me, when you got a broken bone to get it supported. There's instructions. Like I said, there's a tourniquet, there's gauze, there's hand sanitizer and disinfectants and eye wash and burn dressing, and probably most of that's over here too. But it really appeals to me to be able to bam, bam, and take it with you in the car without having it, I don't know. And besides that, if you have a better solution someday, or you put a bigger first aid kit for 200 bucks on the wall of your wood shop, you can take this gear out and have another Packout. So I don't know how that's not a win. Maybe you buy a cheaper plastic storage system and take one of these systems. I don't know. But put it where you can get it. Learn how to use it. And make sure everybody in your family knows where it's at. And then there's one other thing that Chris pointed out to me. That if you're working in your shop alone quite a bit, you need to have a protocol with your people. Either a radio or a camera or a check-in schedule so that every so often, every half hour or 45 minutes, somebody just checks to make sure you aren't standing there with your arm run down into the jointer and can't get over to the first aid kit, even if it is on the floor. Thanks for watching Essential Craftsman, and keep up the good work.